Hey everybody! So, one more Krav Maga myth. And this one maybe is not so much a myth as a conundrum or a contradiction with some of the things that we see being said and some of the things that I often see being taught. So, one of the things that we often talk about in the context of managing adrenaline and the kind of things that you can do in a highly adrenal state is the fact that fine motor skill become very difficult to implement. Right, so things that involve finger gripping or very refined or delicate movements are very hard to do when you're adrenalized. And that's true. So most of the time, what do we focus on? We focus on gross motor skills, right? Big muscle movements, things that don't take a lot of detail or fine attention to implement, right? Which is much easier to do when you're adrenalized. Makes sense. But what do you see with a lot of traditional Krav Maga techniques for defending a knife is, you do some kind of block and then you apply a type of wrist lock. Now, wrist locks are absolutely 100% fine motor skills. Even if you're looking at the kind of cavaliers, I just grab his arm and bend, you still have to have correct placement of the arm and how to control the bend and the wrist. If you just grab the wrist and try and move it against a moving target with somebody who's adrenalized, not going to work. Right? So on one hand, we're going, fine motor skills don't work. On the other hand, you see people teaching fine motor skills. Same thing with a lot of time we look at firearm disarms, where you have to grab exactly here and not there. But if you're going to be adrenalized, that's impossible. So, which one is it? Now, the thing is, if we're kind of trying to figure this out, it's not that fine motor skills don't work. Fine motor skills can work. You just have to get to a position where you are, let's say, mentally or even physically dominating the other person enough to the point where you can apply them. And that might be get to a position where you do a gross motor skill, you control, you do some damage or apply something to get them distracted. And once you've gotten to a point where you can kind of control them and hopefully manage your adrenaline well enough, then you might be able to apply a fine motor skill. But that's not going to be all the time. You have to train that. And even then, it's going to be really, really hard. So, make sure that if you are talking about applying fine motor skill, do you know when it's appropriate to apply it, how it's appropriate to apply it? And while we're at it, try to avoid, generalist statements like fine motor skills don't ever work. There's always a time and a context. And if you are going to use those statements, make sure that it's clear that it is the majority of the time or within specific context, rather than saying when X, do Y. Because then we're neglecting one of the most important things of teaching self-defense, right? Not just martial arts, combatives, combat sports, Krav Maga, what have you, which is context. Everything is about context, which is really more about developing the skills up here than anything else, so we can respond rather than react in a given situation. All right? So, have to think about that.